Welcome to Celeb Scene Central. We collectively buried Alien, Covenant, and we should all feel bad for that. When people look back on the Alien franchise, they make sure to anoint 1979's Alien and 1980 SIX's Aliens as certified classics and Prometheus and Alien 3 as misunderstood gems. However, Alien, Covenant was shrugged off completely upon its release. Met with mixed critical reactions and a decent enough box office return, Ridley Scott's third time directing an Alien film was seen as a ho-hum retread of all the hits we'd come to expect, a panicky course correction after the pretentious musings of Prometheus. But I want to argue that Covenant was vastly slept on and outright disrespected. Fans and critics willingly overlooked Scott deliciously rolling around in the mud and blood of an all-killer no-filler return to the horror roots of the franchise. What is Alien, Covenant about? The Covenant is a ship on a quest to Origi 6, carrying 2,000 sleeping colonists and a huge stash of human embryos, all watched over by the ship's crew. When the crew catches a transmission from a nearby planet that seems more hospitable and much closer than their target, Captain Oram, Billy Crudup, decides to have the ship land there instead, much to the chagrin of Daniels, Catherine Waterston, who thinks it's a terrible idea. Nevertheless, the crew makes its way onto the planet, not realizing that they've casually walked into an environment teeming with unidentified particles and spores that infect some of the crew with the alien DNA, triggering an avalanche of chaos. All seems lost for the squad until they're saved by a mysterious figure, who turns out to be David, Michael Fassbender, having survived his previous adventure in Prometheus. He should be their savior, but David only becomes an even worse agitator as he jeopardizes everyone with his own nefarious plans. Initially conceived as the second chapter of a trilogy about David's hand in the creation of the xenomorphs, Alien, Covenant had to balance serving the dangling plot threads of Prometheus with giving the audience more of the conventional horror and action beats that fans complained were missing in Prometheus. In crafting this story, Ridley Scott decided to not only rip out all the pretentiousness of Prometheus but sought to undermine any presence of it at all by making this film as silly and dumb as possible. Ridley Scott viciously mocks humans for their stupidity. Scott went so hard in the direction of making Covenant not pretentious that he made it not just a horror movie, but a near parody-level rendition of a horror film. The Alien series has long had a tradition of seemingly smart characters being rendered insanely stupid whenever a xenomorph is around, but this one takes the cake for just how quickly things get dumb here. Almost every character stumbles their way into dangerous situations with a level of tactlessness that makes you wonder if the scientists from the cabin in the woods are pumping IQ-lowering gas into the scenes as they're happening. Scott makes sure to include a checklist of every dumb horror cliché you've probably rolled your eyes at and throws them at the audience with a forked tongue sticking out of his cheek. He gets away with this largely by showing how each person's idiotic behavior is rooted in their own assumed comfort or complete unpreparedness for what they need to do, so it doesn't feel like out-of-left-field buffoonery just for the sake of it. There is no scream rule of survival he left untouched: a meathead getting infected because he decided to smoke weed, 2 people getting killed because they were too busy having sex in the shower, a naive person being far too trusting of a shady character asking them to go down a dark hallway to a basement, and people having the aim of a stormtrooper when they're 2 feet in front of their target. Scott's Alien films have always enjoyed the gap between people's presumed competence and actual denseness, but Covenant is the one that feels most humorously disgusted at humanity's inability to stand up in the face of its own demise. Ridley Scott dials up the horror and gore for Alien, Covenant. Adding insult to injury is the way Scott has the violence enacted on the human meat puppets at a viciousness that is unmatched for the franchise. While the series has always had iconic gross-out moments throughout its run, see the original chestburster scene from Alien and the body surgery sequence from Prometheus, most of the films shirk excessive blood or gore. Covenant pushes the envelope on the brutality of what the human victims must endure. When blood flows, it pours out of the bodies like geysers of cherry red wine, with twines of entrails carried along the current. Scott took our nightmares of simple chestbursters and turned Covenant's characters into infinitely ickier piñatas by ripping them out of new body parts, most notably the back in what's arguably the best serving of this film's flavor of torrential horror. As Ledward violently shudders as a xenomorph baby comes out of him, fluorescent lights making him look like a waterlogged zombie, pilot Ferris, Amy Seimetz, locks him and biologist Karine, Carmen Ejogo, in the medroom while she runs to get help. Once she returns with a gun, an absolute clown show breaks out. Ferris slips on blood, fires one shot into the ceiling, Crab crawls her way out of the room so slowly that she crushes her ankle in the closing mechanical door, breaks it worse by jumping down some stairs, and aims another shotgun at the baby so haphazardly that it blows up the entire ship. This was, by all accounts, Ferris' first time being scared, and she handled it about as poorly as she possibly could, demonstrating Scott's conviction that most humans are utterly silly dummies when under the influence of abject fear. Alien, Covenant's camp factor evokes giallo and hammer horror. That silliness extends to the film's treatment of genre and tone, as it mixes the depravity of violence with the goofiness of the follies of human behavior. There's arguably a thin line between horror and comedy, and Alien Covenant gleefully shreds through that line while never actually going for a single punchline or gag. The juxtaposition of scenes of the crew suffering extremely grisly shocks with goofy interludes of David spiraling into narcissistic erotic self-importance as a mad scientist striving to be his own Frankenstein creates a campy flow that leaves everything heightened. Not only does it allow Scott to indulge in histrionic stylization that's out of Hammer horror and giallo films, complete with shrieking echoing through dark corridors, decapitated heads, and POV shots of the killer stalking its prey, but it cinematically pokes fun at how preposterous the alien mythology has become. By seeing these humans repeatedly slip on banana peels and barely think their way through easy-to-avoid scenarios, and seeing how David is too busy thinking about how bad he wants to literally K himself, Scott mocks the very world-building he painstakingly built. Rather than continue down the rabbit hole of existential exploration of Prometheus, Scott went all in on the absurdity that the most perfectly designed killing organism was created purely because David is the messiest bitch in the whole galaxy who wanted petty revenge for his daddy issues. Given the xenomorph's propensity for sexually based violence, there's now a retroactive layer of humor to the idea that it all comes from David passing his bizarre fetishes onto an entire homegrown race of drooling cat-like creatures.